Boom, let's see. All right, here we go. So we're going to get into our marketing webinar. And first, like to give some brief introductions. So my name is Justin Nicholson, the AgLanta Grown Project Coordinator with the City of Atlanta's AgLanta program. And joining me from our team is Yesenia Maldonado, who's doing some back end. She's going to be facilitating the polls for us and monitoring the chat. And helping this meeting move efficiently. So we thank you so much, Yesenia. And I'll pass the mic over to Tanisio.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. My name is Tanisio Sanima. I am the Urban Agriculture Manager with the City of East Point via our program known as East Point Grown. I see some familiar faces in here, so thank you all for coming and look forward to seeing what information you all glean from tonight and how to help your businesses. So thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alex from Good Agriculture. We are a small company here in Atlanta that supports farmers with back office services. So things like bookkeeping, managing your financials, marketing, which we're going to talk about tonight, applying for grants and other funding, which we'll talk about next week. So we're super excited to see some of y'all again and meet some new faces tonight.
I'm Kirsten Simmons. I'm the Chief Farming Officer with Good Agriculture. And I also run Ecosystem Farm, which is a U-Pick strawberry farm in South Atlanta.
All right. And we at the City of Atlanta often like to make sure that we are setting the stage or intentions with grounding and properly acknowledging the land, territories, practices, and cultures of the indigenous peoples, the horrifically removed First Nations. Here's the Muskogee Creek people and the enslaved people of the African diaspora who largely built this area and the economy, and the countless migrants and immigrants who largely are the laborers of the current agricultural food system today. We also want to uplift all people of the global majority, also known as Black, Indigenous, and other people of color or BIPOC, as well as other individuals, groups, populations, and cultures that continue to show up for our anti-racist communities and practices for all of us to benefit here in Atlanta and beyond. And we also want to pay respect, gratitude, and support to all humankind and living beings in the intersecting and overlapping social identities and factors such as gender, identity, caste, sexual orientation, race, class, religion, disability, physical appearance, and height. And this grounding and acknowledgement was written by our Urban Ag Director, J. Olu Bayowu. And I think we would be remiss if we did not mention a quote from Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. "No one is free until we are all free." Thank you.
Thanks, Justin. So some ground rules for tonight. So this may be familiar to some of y'all, but we're going to go through a lot of content tonight. So please don't hesitate to interrupt at any point with questions. Don't try to save them for the end. And for those of you who haven't used Zoom in a while, if you go into the upper right-hand corner where there's the 3 dots that says more, and you click on that, and then you look at the option for reactions, that gives you an opportunity to raise your hand virtually or react to other things. So, give a thumbs up or anything else like that. So feel free to use those reactions along the way too. Is a second thing here is feel free to ask specific questions from your farm or give specific examples. The more tailored we can make this to the things that y'all are facing with your businesses, the better this will be. And there's also no such thing as a dumb question. We know that you guys are farmers first and foremost, and this may not be, marketing may not be, your forte. So don't, feel free to just ask whatever, because I'm sure if you have a question, someone else on the call has the same question. All right, so we're going to do a quick little icebreaker. So feel free to put answers in the chat. So icebreaker, what is the weirdest ad you've ever seen? And I'm actually going to share one from yesterday, which was an auto shop that had a deal for gluten-free tire rotations.
Was that Take 5 Auto?
I honestly don't remember, so I guess it wasn't that good of an ad. I just remember the sign.
Yeah, I've seen that one too.
My favorite weird ad is the Squatty Potty ad with the rainbow pooping unicorn. Skittles as chicken pox. Ooh, that's a good one.
I don't think I've seen that one.
Yeah.
Was it an ad for Skittles or against Skittles?
Okay, so it was the Skittles ad, and these two people ate Skittles. Then they got like chicken pox, Skittles all over them, and then one of them picked one of them off of the other person and ate it. And it was weird and gross. Yeah,
I can't say that would make me more likely to buy Skittles.
I know.
Yeah. Any of the Chick-fil-A billboards. Yeah, those are pretty memorable. So I think there was one from like 7 or 8 years ago that had the Chick-fil-A cows and tutus.
Yeah. There was a brief moment 10 years ago when there was rumors that they were going to get rid of the cow campaign, and everyone rioted. And so they just brought it back. Any other examples y'all want to share? Is anyone having trouble with the chat?
Alex, if you don't mind, I just wanted to say I thought I heard about, you remember the little dog that was the Yo Quiero Taco Bell?
Yes.
Yeah, well, I heard that they had actually done a poll, and it worked out that no one actually remembered that that dog was associated with Taco Bell, and that's why they got rid of it. Even though the dog even said Taco Bell.
I thought that was pretty weird myself. Like that was a pretty weird Taco Bell ad, but it was, the thing, it was so catchy. So
And then Chandra put in the chat the Haribo gummy bear commercial with the kids. Also not sure that I've seen that one. Awesome. Well, we can get into the agenda for the day. So we already covered introductions, and we'll also cover types of agriculture sales channels. So a sales channel is basically just where you can sell your goods. So we'll go over kind of what those are and how to decide which one makes the most sense for your farm. And then we'll talk about, okay, how do you actually access and market to each of these channels, how you can track success and know what's working and not working, and then we'll share some additional resources at the end. So some goals for today. So we have a few listed here, but would love to hear from you guys in the chat. Feel free to put, number 1, 2, 3, or 4 if that's what you were hoping to get out of the session, or please feel free to also type in something else that you were hoping to get out of today. So the goals include learning about different ways to sell your goods, learning how to go about accessing and marketing each of those channels, understanding the requirements of each of those channels, and then, like I said, learning how to track marketing and sales effectiveness. And y'all are welcome to say something else if none of these cover what you're hoping to get out of it. Heather says how to market to businesses. That's a good one. We'll definitely cover that today. Eric says everything. Restaurant and grocery. Selling to restaurant and grocery. We'll cover that. Oh, logistics once you get the new accounts. That's a good one. We'll touch on that a little bit today. And then we'll if you want to, go deeper on that topic, we may have some additional resources to share. Anyone else want to jump in before we keep going? All right, so we're gonna do our first poll. Is any of you mind pulling that up? Any issue getting the poll pulled up?
Yeah, I'm having a little issue. It's saying that because I'm logged in with another device, my polling session isn't active.
Oh,
Yeah, Justin,
right, well, here, we can just do it the old-fashioned way. So the poll is, how do you sell most of your oh, there it goes. There we go. And I think this one is multiple choice, so you can pick more than one option. And I think Eva's still having trouble with the polls, so she says combination of farmers market and on-site. So that would be direct to customer. Don't know what a commodity market is. We'll go over that, Leslie. No worries. Give folks a few more seconds to answer here. Looks like about half the participants sell direct to customer, which includes farmers markets, on-site, roadside stands, CSAs, stuff like that. We got one answer for chefs, one for retail and grocery stores, and then one for wholesale, including co-ops. And then we got one more vote in the chat for direct to customer. So it sounds like majority is direct to customer, which makes sense, especially for urban farms. So I'm gonna share the results and we'll close out the poll here. All right, so we're gonna go over all the different ways you can sell your goods. And this chart along the bottom, this is how far away are you from your end customer? So on the far left side, we have D2C, which is a common acronym for direct to customer. So again, this is farmers markets, roadside stands, CSAs, online sales, anything where you're selling your product to the person who's going to eat it. And then the next closest is selling to chefs. So they're kind of like a direct end customer, but they're preparing a meal for someone else who's actually going to eat it. And then we have institutions. So this is things like schools, corporate offices, hospitals, other kind of like, big buyers who are kind of like chefs, but on a bigger scale. They're buying your food and they're preparing it for their end customer. And then there's retail stores where they are selling your product to someone else. Then there's wholesalers where you're not really doing the selling, you're giving your product to a distributor who's going to do the sales for you. And then commodity markets, which are there's so this is like the market for corn or for cotton or for cattle, where there's kind of a set market price and you sell into that market. And not only are you usually not selling to the end customer, but folks could even buy financial options on the goods and trade them around. So it's kind of like a wholesale market on steroids. And so the thing to notice here is that as we get further away from the end customer, the price you get for your product generally decreases, which is probably something you guys have observed, which is probably why a lot of you are selling direct to customer. But also your marketing effort decreases. So it's a lot harder to sell direct to customer. You have to put a lot more effort into it, but you do get a higher price. And then the further away you get from your customer, the less you have to market because you're further away from them. But the thing to notice is generally the requirements from your farm increase. So you may have to sell at a larger volume. You may have to have certain certifications that you don't need selling direct to customer. So we'll get more into detail here. And so we'll do kind of like these quick deep dives into each of these channels. And again, feel free to ask questions in the chat or raise your hand or just blurt out a question at any time. So we kind of already talked about what this looks like. I think the one I forgot to mention was UPick can also be a version of direct to customer. And so the advantages of this, that you're going to get the highest price when you do this. But you're also going to have to expend the most effort doing the marketing. On the bright side, the requirements tend to be pretty low. The barrier to entry is not very high, especially if you're doing something like just setting up a roadside stand and, leaving out a box for money and customers can just come by. Advantages, again, highest price, easy entry, no certifications required generally. Your customer is not going to ask you like, hey, I want to see proof of your organic certification generally. And you also have the most connection to your customer. So especially if you're first starting out and you're trying to figure out like, what should I grow? How should I price it? Like, how do people want this package? Do they normally buy, one serving at a time, or would they prefer to buy in bulk? All of those things that's generally easier information to get if you're selling direct to customer, because you can just have a conversation with your customers. The disadvantages of this, it can direct to customer is hard to scale. So like if you're selling at farmers markets, one farmers market is easy, two is hard, especially if they're both on Saturday morning. You have to hire somebody to do that for you. The market can also be limited. I think only 3% of food is sold direct to customer. So, you're never going to reach the folks who are, maybe they're single parents and they don't have time to come to the farmer's market and they're doing their grocery shopping like Tuesday at 10 p.m. because that's when they have time. And so they're going to have to go to your grocery store. And we also talk about it requires a lot of marketing. So this channel generally works well, like if you like marketing and if you like that customer engagement, it can be very rewarding. And if you're not someone who likes marketing, this one could be a little bit tougher. It also works well for beginning farmers and folks who are at a smaller scale. So then kind of the next, step along the scale of getting further away from the customer is selling to chefs. So again, the price for this tends to be pretty high. The effort also tends to be pretty high because you have to build these one-on-one relationships with chefs. Generally, they only have, a handful of restaurants. But again, the requirements are pretty low. So this is still an easier channel for a beginning farmer or someone who's smaller. The advantages here, especially when you can compare it to straight direct to customer, is it can be a higher volume channel because obviously chefs are feeding a lot more people than, individual customers. So, one customer might be feeding their family, and that might be, 4 or 5 people. A chef might be feeding hundreds of people a night. There also tends to be more consistent demands because, chefs run their businesses all throughout the year. They're not going to, disappear over the holidays or during spring break or, summer holidays. Now, disadvantages are you do have to really build that relationship with the chef and you have to nurture that. So getting back to Howard's question earlier of, logistics, once you have that relationship with the chef, you really have to be on top of, making sure they know what you have for sale every week, making sure you're getting the deliveries on time and getting the feedback from them of, hey, what do you think you're going to need a month from now? And so that can sometimes be like herding cats. And you do have to provide excellent customer service, even though chefs can be busy and stressed out and, maybe not always the easiest folks to work with.
I'll jump in here and say that, like, one of the key things about working with chefs is that you have to make sure that they pay you. They will very rarely meet you with cash on hand. And so it is up to you to make sure that that invoice gets sent out and then gets paid. And I've been burned myself as a farmer, drop stuff off and then never got paid. I've seen other farmers get burned with it. Each chef that you work with is going to have a different preference as to how they communicate with you. So, some of them are going to want text messages, some will want email, some will want a phone call. And that's something that you have to stay on top of, but do not be afraid to curate your chef clients. If someone is too much of a pain in the ass and they don't pay you on time and they're demanding, just say you're fired, and then as you start to move towards having more and more relationships, maybe you start saying, I'm only going to work with chefs who are okay with texting, and I can send out group texts or I can, use a texting service. And then that way, all of my communication is in one place and it's easy and it's streamlined. So there are ways that you can make working with chefs easier, but they are very much like herding cats.
Yeah. So if you're the kind of person who can really stay on top of the details and maybe you already have local relationships with folks, this could be a good channel for you. All right, then institutions. So this is, like I said, this is kind of like selling chefs, except each customer is a lot bigger. The other thing to point out here is this is really where more requirements for your farm start to come in. So, an end customer or a chef, they know you, they know that you're growing organically and you have, your farm has good processes around food safety, but an institution generally is not going to just trust you. They're going to want to see some paperwork to know that, your product is safe and it is what you say it is. But the advantages here, again, they're bigger customers, they're higher volume, they're more consistent demand. You tend to have a contract up front, which can be a little bit easier to deal with. And sometimes depending on who you're selling to, you can get a relatively high price because these institutions will have ESG efforts, and ESG is just a corporate acronym for environmental, social, and governance, which is kind of a nonsensical acronym, but it's basically like how these institutions are doing good for their community. So if you can come to them and say like, hey, I am a local farmer, I grow really healthy food, you're supporting the local economy, like buy from me, and also, by the way, like pay me a little bit more. Generally that's something these institutions will go for. Now, the disadvantage here is these institutions can be really slow. So, if your season starts in March, I would not start marketing to these folks in February. You're just not going to get a contract in time. It's not unusual for these things to take 6 to 12 months to finalize. So just be aware of that. And again, you probably are going to have the certifications in hand ahead of time. But if you're someone who's kind of growing your business, you've got more scale, and you still like that kind of end customer relationship in the sales process, this could be a good channel for you. All right, and then we've got retail stores, which does include grocery stores. So this is selling to stores of various sizes. Generally, it helps to start with smaller folks and kind of move your way up the food chain. Now you do start to see lower prices at this point because it is kind of a wholesale-ish channel. But again, the effort does tend to be lower once you're in the store. There's no more marketing you have to do. You're just hoping that customers pick up your product. And again, the requirements do tend to be high. So you're probably not going to get a price premium unless you have an organic certification or other certifications like, gluten-free certification, grass-fed, livestock, regenerative farming, some of those things. But again, if you can kind of meet that need and provide a consistent supply that the grocery store is going to be interested in, then it is a high volume channel. And the other thing is it is a wider reach channel. So you are able to sell your food to the single parent who only does their grocery shopping at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday in a way that you would not be able to reach that person in some of these other channels. So if you're someone who prefers the operations side to the sales side and you grow large volumes of consistent products, so you can provide tomatoes for 6 months instead of just 2 months, or you can provide greens 9 months of the year, this might be a good channel for you.
And with this channel, you want to focus on the familiar product. When you're going direct to customer and you can explain exactly what Celtis is, you are going to have the ability to educate the consumer. You're not educating anybody if you're selling into a retail store. So, go with the red tomato, go with the brown egg or the white egg. People are going to go for what they're familiar with, and you need to be able to provide that if you're selling into retail. Otherwise, your product is not going to sell. And if your product is not selling, the retail store is not going to be buying from you for very long.
Yeah, the other thing is with both retail stores and direct to customer, because it's the end eater who's picking up the thing and deciding to buy it, we've all seen the thing of like the pretty product does better, the thing with the blemish doesn't get picked up by the customer. So if you do tend to have like tomatoes that are a million different sizes or things like that, oftentimes selling to a chef or an institution, because they'll transform it into something else that still tastes amazing, but isn't as strange looking to the person who doesn't know what food looks like coming off the farm. So that can be a consideration as well. All right, and then wholesale. So you're basically, again, you're not really selling at this point. You're sending your product to a distributor who is actually the one who's going to sell it to the end consumer. So this is a pretty easy as far as effort expended channel, but you are going to have a lower price because the wholesaler still has to make their margin somewhere, and they're handling all the logistics and things for you. The advantages here, so especially compared to retail stores, like wholesalers can generally handle some inconsistency in supply. So if you only have something for a month, or you're not quite sure, this is my first time growing and I'm not really sure how much I'm going to have, this can be a good channel for that. Again, this kind of depends on the wholesaler. The disadvantages here, it is hard to differentiate your product. So again, you're probably going to get a lower price. Therefore, it does require some scale to be economical. So this tends to work for the larger farmer. And again, you are going to need certifications here because they're a bigger channel. And then the last one, so the commodity market, again, this is the easiest one of all. You are not selling, you are selling into a commodity market where, there's like these big contracts and PepsiCo is buying a bazillion bushels of corn and they don't really care where it comes from. But you are going to get the lowest price here because there is no differentiation. Maybe you'll get more for an organic certification, but otherwise they don't really care where the corn came from. They don't care if it's local. They don't care if it's a sustainable farmer or anything like that. This requires a really large scale to be profitable. So if you're anywhere near the city of Atlanta, and you've got thousands of acres to do this, that would be a great situation to be in. I don't think anyone has thousands of acres near the city of Atlanta. So yeah, if you've got lots of land and you want to minimize your effort in marketing, this could be a good fit for you. But I don't expect this is going to be many farmers on this call. All right. So I just talked a lot, so we're gonna do another poll here. Yesenia, do you mind pulling it up? We've actually kind of got 2 polls in a row here.
So I still am having trouble releasing it from my end. Justin
got it pulled up.
I'm not sure if are you able to pull up the poll, Justin?
Yeah, can you all see the poll?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, we've already got some folks voting. And again, I think this one is you can do multiple selections. And just for the recording purposes, the poll question is, what channel do you think would work best for where you and your farm are today? It looks like most folks are saying direct to customer. Got a couple of answers for chefs, a couple answers for wholesale, and then one person, retailer, grocery stores. No one has said institutions or commodity markets. Which is interesting. All right, so we can go ahead and share the results here. Would anyone like to share either, over voice or via chat why they answered the way they did? Eva said farmers markets on site, maybe chefs, but only if they would communicate and be reliable. So it looks like Eva's taken Kirsten's advice of curating your customers.
Yep. It's not impossible to find chefs that communicate and are reliable, but I wouldn't quite call them unicorns, maybe rhinoceroses.
Well, there is the like artist stereotype, right?
Yeah.
Really creative people don't always tend to be on top of details.
Mm-hmm.
Does anyone else want to share why they answered the way they did? And Heather, I'm guessing you picked direct to customer as your channel? Yes. So Heather said she's, a beginner and doesn't know what her volume is going to be yet. And yeah, you're right. Leslie says same. Yeah, because oh, go ahead, Howard.
Great. I chose grocery store because I think that they might have repeat customers and you don't have to go, hopefully you don't have to go to so many places to get your product out there.
Yeah. Yeah, save a lot of time on delivery.
And you've been selling to the Cab Farmers Market, if I remember correctly.
I'm guessing
yes, that is correct. Yeah, I was on mute, sorry. Yes.
DeKalb Farmers Market, which is the store, not the farmers market, just for anyone who is on this recording who may not know what that is.
Yeah.
And then Chandra says same as Heather and Leslie. So selling direct to customer because just, beginning and not sure what volumes are going to be yet. Makes a lot of sense. All right. So now we're going to do the next poll. Justin, you mind pulling that up? Or Yesenia, I'm not sure. Saw her come back in. Do you guys need me to
Are you able to see it now? No.
I don't see it.
We still see the other one now. It gives us the option to say stop sharing. Do we need to do that first?
Okay. All right, there we go.
Yes.
So this poll is, what channel would you like to end up selling into? So once your business is large and mature, where do you want to end up? And again, you can select multiple ones. And again, if folks want to share in the chat or over voice why they answered the way we did, or why you answered the way you did, that would be good to share. Interestingly, 5 out of 5 so far said they would like to end up still selling direct to customer. We got 3 out of 5 for chefs, 1 out of 5 for institutions, 3 out of 5 for retail, 3 out of 5 for wholesale. So it seems like a good mix of channels here. And looks like probably everyone wants to sell into more than one channel, which I think makes a lot of sense.
Very, very smart. You only have one channel or one customer, you are at major risk. I think maybe this story was supposed to be later on in the webinar, but does anyone remember the Atlanta dairy? Because it was Atlanta Fresh, if I remember correctly. They did yogurt, and their main sales outlet was Whole Foods, and they took on a bunch of debt to try to scale to meet Whole Foods expectations right before Whole Foods got bought out by Amazon. And within 6 months, contract got pulled, and Atlanta Fresh was out of business. It's just really a pity because they had some amazing products. But it's a risk of like that if you're dependent on one customer, you are at that customer's whims.
Yeah, that's a good story. And I'm sure lots of other folks have experiences from, when COVID started and the market just got so disrupted. If you had, more than one place you were selling your product, it was a little bit easier to ship around. And we had Heather in the chat say she'd love to have a relationship with a supplement company to sell wholesale, but would still want to sell direct to customer. Seems like her first choice. Yeah, I think that can make sense because you are going to get the highest price for selling direct to customer. So especially if you can get loyal customers where you don't have to market as hard anymore because you just got people coming back and buying again and again. That can be a really profitable channel. Anyone else want to share why they voted the way they did?
I'll share. So I was thinking along the same line as Heather, for kind of choosing to continue to work with direct to consumer and also selling wholesale to not necessarily a supplement company, but I grow medicinal herbs, so something similar. And retail just really didn't make sense for me right now, unless I would get into like teas or something. And even then, I want to say I kind of heard rumor that like your volume has to be so much and like you have to go in from distributors and things like that. And for me, I don't know that I want to do that.
Yeah, the rumors you've heard are correct. We'll go into a little more detail on that in a minute here. Anyone else want to share before we keep going? I love how y'all are thinking about this. All right, let me exit out of the poll here. All right, so we made this little calculator that can help with the business case of, which channel makes sense for where you are. And so we're just going to give a couple of examples of farmers of different sizes. So our first example here is a new farmer with 1,000 pounds of produce. So they're not selling huge volumes yet. And so you can see in this first row, you can type in, what price you think you're going to get from each of these channels. So, let's say this is, the price for a pound of tomatoes. So at the farmer's market, you could sell that for $5 a pound pretty easily. Chefs, you may give them a little bit of a volume discount. You might, only charge them $4. Institutions, you might charge them $3.50. Stores down to $3. Wholesale might be $2.50. And then, the commodity market that doesn't care about your local organic tomatoes, you might only get $1.50 for that. And then you want to look at what is my cost to produce my product. If you have questions about like, oh, how the heck do I get to this number? I would suggest maybe going back to our first webinar about financial management. We talk about that a little bit. And then of course, don't forget the cost for your packaging, because if you're selling direct to customer or in a store, you might need the product to look a little bit prettier than if you're selling to an institution or wholesale. And then estimate how much time you have to spend marketing, how much time you have to spend delivering, and then, how much gas you have to spend driving around. So, for direct to customer, if you, spend a few hours a week on your social media and your email newsletters, and then you spend 4 hours at a couple of farmers markets, that might add up to 12 hours a week of marketing. And then it might take another 5 hours to drive around to a couple of farmers markets. And so mileage might be a little higher. And if you go to chefs, you might spend some time each week, trying to meet a couple of new chefs, the ones you already know, sending them the list of stuff that's fresh that week. So that's kind of time consuming. And then you got to make the delivery route all around the city. So that might, take several hours. But then when you get to institutions, probably have to market a little bit less. You still got to make those sales and get to know folks and, work on contracts and stuff like that. But it's probably a little bit easier than D2C or chefs. And you probably only have to make one delivery to whatever institution it is. So that's probably a little bit easier from a delivery perspective. And then stores and wholesale, you're spending even less time marketing. You just kind of have to like find the right providers. You probably only have to make one delivery again. So that's easier. So that's kind of how you might think about some of those numbers. And then certification costs. So if you're selling direct to customer, you may not need a certification. So, the cost might be zero there, but, let's say if you're selling to a school, they may not ask for an organic certification, but they do definitely want a food safety certification from you. So that might be some extra cost for you to implement those processes and actually work with the certifier and get all that done. And then if you go to a retail store, well, now you want to put like all sorts of certifications on your product so you can get the highest price possible and appeal to the most customers possible. So of course you're going to have food safety because that'll be required, but maybe you also get the organic certification, you get the, whatever else you might be eligible for. And then wholesale, again, you're doing the same thing because you need your certifications to kind of speak for your product because you're not there to promote it to the customer. And then the commodity market, they don't care about your certifications, but, you might still need the food safety one. So then if you kind of add all that up, this thing will kind of spit out an estimated profitability. And so what do you guys notice about the new farmer? Which channels are profitable here? And is that kind of what you expected? So we got an answer in the chat. Yes, that's what's expected. And so I'm assuming Chandra's pointing out to the fact that the blue box is highlighting the profitable channels. So kind of giving the answer away. But yeah, direct to customer and chefs are the two profitable channels here. And really what this comes down to is this new farmer just doesn't have enough volume to justify the cost of those certifications. And so that really eats into their profitability. So if we go to our next example, so now we've got kind of a mid-sized farmer. They've got 10,000 pounds of produce. And, they can still get pretty high prices because they're still, the local farmers, kind of a small business, and they've got a good story. But their cost of products is now a lot lower because they've got scale. So, like the cost of their tractor gets spread over more pounds of produce, and the cost of their farm mortgage and all the other things that go into running a farm. And maybe they're able to like buy their compost in bulk and other things like that. They've also now, if they're trying to sell direct to customer or to chefs, they've got to spend a lot more time marketing and delivering. So maybe instead of going to 2 farmers markets, now they've got to go to 4, and they're delivering a CSA. If they're, selling to chefs, now maybe they have to sell to chefs in like 2 different towns instead of 1. So that could be more time. But then you can see for the bigger channels, they still don't have to spend that much time marketing because, you just have to do less when you're selling wholesale or to stores. So what do you guys notice about this farmer? What makes the most sense for a mid-sized farmer? Just based off the numbers we put in here. This time I'm not gonna have the blue box that gives away the answer.
I'd kind of say it would depend if they have the capacity to do some of the DTC or chefs things without adding like another head count and that like cutting into the profitability. But I'd say for me, 10,000 pounds, I probably would kind of stick more towards the institutions and maybe combine it with DT2C or in chefs, just to not have to push 10,000 pounds through like markets.
Yeah. Yeah, and we got an answer in the chat from Leslie, direct to customer by far. So I think Leslie and Chandra are highlighting a couple good things here. So first off, if you're just looking at how many dollars are coming in, DTC is the most profitable by far. So if you have the capacity to move lots of stuff through markets, this still makes a lot of sense for you. But then if you look at, how much the farmer is earning basically per hour of work when you include the market for, the marketing and delivery time, institutions make sense, but, DTC and chefs are also pretty profitable per hour. So, Chandra's point of I'd want to spread it around a little bit and not be too dependent on one channel, I think is really smart. And at this point, it's also kind of up to the farmer of what do they like to do? If they like going to the markets and interacting with their customers, then that probably makes a lot of sense to stay D2C. If they like working with chefs and going to a restaurant and seeing their food on a plate, that probably makes sense. And if they, don't really like to spend that much time selling, then, maybe they try to get some big institution contracts.
Yeah.
So
this also highlights it's a different, the larger you scale in terms of the amount that you're producing, it's a different skill set for you as a farmer, because you as a farmer are probably not selling at every single market. You're probably not doing all of the marketing anymore. And so the ability to continue to sell into these high effort markets depends on your ability to teach others and to delegate effectively. And that's really hard. Some people are really good at it. It can definitely be learned. I've really been going through that process of learning it myself over the past few years. But if you as an individual farmer have 24 hours in the day, and ideally you sleep at least 7 of them, and you're probably taking another few for things like eating and showering and basic, life stuff. So you have a limited amount of product that you can sell. So your ability to continue to get the highest price per pound of that product is going to depend on your ability to both delegate to others what you need done and inspire them to do it as well as you would do it yourself.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think that'll be especially obvious when we start talking about the large farmer. So now someone who's got 50,000 pounds of produce. And so, Kirsten was talking about being able to inspire other people to do it just as well as you. But we all know it's much more fun to buy stuff from the farmer than for someone who works for the farmer for a couple of hours on a Saturday. So this large farmer is probably not going to get the same like super high price as the small farmer just because people like small. But you know, they still definitely get more money for direct to customer than they do in a commodity market. This large farmer also has the lowest cost of product because they've really got some scale at this point. But the effort that would have to go into direct to customer or chefs and even institutions at this point is pretty high. So, you know, you might have to go to 20 farmers markets, and that means, you know, hiring an army of Saturday workers to be able to help with this. You know, you're going to have to probably have, you know, someone you're going to have a team of people doing the delivery at this point. This is not, unless you want to spend, you know, 80 hours a week driving around, which I don't think anyone does. And you can see, you know, similar for chefs, it's a lot of effort. Whereas, you know, wholesale and commodity are lower efforts here. So what do you guys notice about what probably makes sense for this farmer? Or what would you do if you were a farmer with these numbers? So Chandra says commodity. Why is that?
I'd said commodity just based off of the dollars per hour. Like I would start there and then diversify out. But I think somebody who is producing 50,000 pounds of produce, they're thinking big scale, so commodity and maybe even wholesale. And I don't think they are really concerned about any of the smaller channels.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Just looking at that dollar per hour, that's much higher than anything else. Now the overall profitability is lower, so you know, really just the farmer has to decide how much of their time and their team's time do they want to invest in marketing. But yeah, commodity is a very profitable option at this point. And I think Janet is new to the call, so Janet, you want to share your thoughts either over voice or via chat about where you would sell if you were this farmer? And we also got in the chat from Leslie, store or wholesale for better revenue. So it looks like Leslie is balancing the pure profitability with the profitability per hour and is going for something that still nets a pretty high profitability but saves the farmer time, which I think is what a lot of folks at this scale choose to do. Janet says she would look at institutions and wholesale. So yeah, she's also looking at that pretty high dollar per hour and also pretty high profitability, which I think makes a lot of sense.
Alex, I wanted to chime in with a quick question for the group, if you don't mind.
Oh, of course.
So I'd like to hear from you all, what effect would teaming up with other farmers towards any specific channel offer to you all? What do you think would happen? And in the industry, we call that a cooperative.
Yeah, that's it.
From you all.
That's a great question. So at the beginning, I kind of skimmed over this, but probably should have spent more time on it. So we kind of see, sorry, I'm trying to back up. There's lots of animations here. We kind of see co-ops as a version of selling wholesale, because generally the way a co-op works is you kind of, you sell your goods kind of to the co-op, and then the co-op is the one that finds the market for the product, and they can reach a lot larger market than one farmer could on their own. So you might imagine that you know, one farmer selling tomatoes with 1,000 pounds of tomatoes like has no chance of getting into a Kroger. But if, you know, 50 small tomato farmers team up and now they've got 50,000 pounds of tomatoes, well, that's a quantity that a Kroger can work with. So that can be a really powerful thing. Now the trick with a co-op is making sure that, you know, it's a group of farmers that you like and trust, because the success of your product is going to be tied to everyone else's. So if you've got a really great product that you're very proud of, and, you know, you're selling in a co-op where maybe you don't approve of people's practices, or, you just don't think they're doing the right thing, then, you're going to get lumped in with them. But if you can find other like-minded farmers, then co-ops can be awesome.
And to bounce off of that, the other challenge with a co-op is making sure that you have consistency across the different farms that you're working with in the co-op, because somewhere like a Kroger is going to want consistent product. And so, can you produce your tomatoes exactly to the same specs as the other farmers in that co-op, and will they then produce to the same specs as you? It can be incredibly powerful when you've got the right group of farmers. And when you don't have the right group of farmers, it can be a disaster.
And Eva put a great question in the chat about teaming up on what scale. So my neighbor starts selling my produce if he doesn't have that item. And I think that's super smart on a smaller scale too. We've seen farmers, groups of like 5 to 10 farmers where each person decides, okay, we're gonna specialize in 1 or 2 items, but we know that the customers at the farmers market like having a diversity of things to choose from. So, we'll kind of, each grow a couple of things, but then we'll, bring in produce from everybody. And it looks to the customer like we've got 15 different items for them, even though, I only had to worry about growing 2 of them. So I think that model can work really well, again, especially if it's with other farmers that you like and trust a lot.
Leslie, to answer your question, a co-op can operate as a CSA. More Farm and Friends is a really good example of this out of Alabama, where they buy from multiple farms and then deliver to the area in Alabama and then also into the Atlanta market. Another example of that would be like Fresh Harvest, where they are buying from local farms and delivering out a CSA box. Then there's also co-op in the sense of what Tanisio was saying in terms of combining, if you have, say, 50 farmers that are all going to grow cherry tomatoes, and combining that together, investing in the certifications and the packaging and processing needed to then sell those into a Kroger or a Whole Foods, and coming together to provide that volume. So you can do a co-op from a bringing together a group of farmers to sell direct to consumer and the co-op takes a cut, or from a combining forces to get into a larger vertical in terms of selling that product.
Yeah, the last point there of an example of something that works well. So in Athens, there's, I forget what this is called, but basically an online platform where there's 50 different farms offering a variety of produce and meats and eggs and dairy and other products, and folks can order online what they want, and they don't have to pick everything from the same farm. They can say, like, I want this from this farm and that from that farm, and maybe they end up with a basket of things that's from 15 different farms. And then all
Market
the farmers, yes, thank you. So they bring all that to the one delivery spot on Thursday, and it's kind of like a CSA in that the customer kind of picks up their basket. But it was an effort put together by lots of different local farmers, and that just works really well because, again, customers really like diversity of choice, and they like to be able to do all of their grocery shopping, quote unquote, in one trip, whether that's actually going to a grocery store or getting a CSA that's already got everything in it for them. And then we're going to talk about one other way, which is value-added products, but we're going to go over that in a few more slides. So we spend a lot of time talking about, sorry, my computer is catching up with my scrolling. So we spend a lot of time about like the strategy of like which channel should I go after, but we haven't spent a lot of time about like how do I actually market to each of those. So we're going to do some deep dives on each of our channels about what is the customer looking for, both what are they looking for from your product, and then what are they looking for from you as a vendor. And we kind of already talked about where certifications are required. So you probably don't need any certifications for direct to customer. Maybe unless you're selling online, then it might be a good idea. chefs, like maybe they'll ask for a food safety one, but you may not need anything. Institutions, you'll definitely need food safety. And then stores, you'll need distinctive certifications. So, like a gluten-free or a grass-fed, things we talked about. And then kind of minimum quantities here. So this gets into the farm capability. So if you're selling direct to customer, you just need to sell a serving at a time. So if if your crop planting turned out not the way you expected to, and you have only a few pounds of something 1 week, that's fine. You can just bring what you have and it'll sell out. And then, weeks where you've just got, way too much, again, hopefully your customers are just hungry for that thing that week. Chefs and institutions, they're going to want, at least boxes of things. So enough to make full meals for lots of people at once. Stores and wholesale, they're going to want pallets. So that's probably at least like $1,000 or $2,000 worth of product at a time. And then if you're selling to commodity markets, you're going to want whole truckfuls of stuff. And then we'll go into the specifics of what they want from your product and what they want from you. So, before we jump into D2C customers, like you guys have all been customers of farmers, or you've all bought food places. Like what are you looking for when you're buying food from a farmer? Like, why do you choose to buy local rather than go to a grocery store?
For me, it's just, it tastes better. I mean, when I stopped growing vegetables on my farm and hit the point where I couldn't get enough at the farmer's market as we went into winter and the down season, and especially after the freeze, that first day that I had to go buy greens from Kroger sucked. It just tasted bad.
Yeah, Heather says the same thing, flavor and then supporting the local economy. Yeah, I think people really like to feel like they're doing good with their dollars. So yeah, if you can appeal like, hey, you're supporting your local farmer, this money's going to stay in the community. It's not, going to Target headquarters up in Minneapolis. I think that really appeals to folks. Eva says quality and freshness. Yeah, freshness is a big one. You got a Saturday market, you picked it on Friday. People love that. Now I know the rest of y'all have bought from farmers.
Same reasons that everyone else listed.
Awesome.
Local, tastes better, etc.
Yep.
There's a couple things you can consider here. Direct to customer, people are looking for things that are familiar to them, but as a direct to consumer seller, you have the ability to reach different customer segments than you would if you were selling into a grocery store. So one of my favorites is papalo. It's a Mexican South American herb. It's almost unheard of in the US, but if you can find that consumer base that wants that, because that is what's familiar to them in their cooking. If you find a community from southern Mexico and say that you have papalo, you are going to just sell out of that because they can't get it anywhere else unless they grow it themselves. So you've got different intricacies that you can get into with direct to customer and having familiar products.
Yeah. The other thing to highlight here is appearance can be important, because again, your customer is probably not going to ask to see your food safety certification, but if your setup is kind of a mess and there's flies and you're kind of wearing like boots that are covered in chicken poop or whatever, they're not going to feel good about the safety of that food to eat. So having like a neat, tidy appearance and something that's like pleasant to look at, that's really going to help draw customers in. And then, how to access here. So we got the question in the chat of what is a CSA? So it stands for Community Supported Agriculture. And there are a couple of different models, but generally the way it works is at the beginning of the year, you sell a share, and So a customer purchases it ahead of time, which it can be a good way for you to bring some cash flow into your farm earlier in the season. And then throughout the season, the customer gets a box every week of your produce. So, it might be vegetables to feed a family for a week, or, different cuts of meat, or, like a dozen eggs, whatever you're selling kind of goes into the box. And then they kind of get that consistently throughout the season. So that's the most common model. Some folks do it where the customer gets a credit, they buy $400 worth of stuff, and every week they can kind of order what they want. There's different ways to do it. So, one way to kind of start that is, generally it's a good idea to just start with your friends and families and neighbors and say like, hey, I'm starting a farm, I'm trying to sell 20 CSAs to kind of help me get going. Are you interested? And, generally your friends, if they like you, are going to say yes, of course. And then, hopefully your CSA will kind of spread from word of mouth, and you can kind of expand as you grow. Other ways to access this market. So obviously the local farmers market, go ask whoever runs the market, ask the market manager what it takes to be a vendor. You can start an online store. So there's plenty of web platforms out there. And then it can be a good idea to run some ads at the beginning. So, Instagram ads, Google ads, et cetera, just to draw people in the first time. And then we'll talk about ways to kind of retain those customers. And then oftentimes, starting social media or like starting an email newsletter can be a good way to attract people too. People sometimes also do stuff like, putting up flyers in local businesses or things like that. But, the digital platforms are really powerful nowadays. It's really easy to reach a lot of people quickly.
And one last thing to emphasize here, people are buying physically your products. They're buying your vegetables, your fruits, your eggs, your meat, whatever, but they're buying your story. They're buying, the feeling that they're supporting local, that they're, getting this quality product and supporting their local farmer and their local economy. And so as you consider where to place yourself in putting the word out there about your product, you need to think about the fact that it's not just a bunch of collards that you're selling them. You're selling them this emotion and this story. It's an act. A farmer's market is an act. You are on stage, you are selling to the customer. And that, I see so many farmers that miss that piece, from showing up in, with a bunch of coolers and not bothering with a table and a tent or a banner or, price tags or anything to help bring that customer in, to spending the entire time on a phone and, only looking up when someone is standing right in front of you asking you a question about your product. You have to create the story around yourself when you're selling direct to customer.
Yeah, thanks, Kirsten. All right, so getting chefs. So again, they're kind of like direct to customer. They're really looking for tasty food. And their chefs also can sometimes be looking for really unique things, again, that they can't get elsewhere, that they can make a really cool menu item out of. So if you're growing the heirloom variety, the purple carrots, you're growing the weird herb that they can't get at the grocery store, they can't get from Cisco. You're growing like the different breed of chicken or cow. Those can all be things that chefs are looking for because it's something cool they can sell. But they're also looking for reliability. Like they need you to give them the things they asked for when they needed them, kind of on spec. So if you are, newer and you're not quite sure like when your product is going to be ready or how much of it is going to be available, maybe start with fewer chefs and just make sure that the ones you have, you can really deliver, and then finding other channels for any surplus that you might end up with. The other thing is chefs are looking for shelf life. So the product they get from you on a Wednesday or a Thursday needs to last all week until they get their next delivery. And that this can also be a way you distinguish your product, because the thing you deliver to them on Wednesday probably got harvested on a Tuesday, which is awesome. And it may be a more robust product that is just going to last long on the shelf anyways because it's healthier. Compared to a Cisco where by the time it gets to the chef, it was, picked 2 weeks ago in another country, shipped overseas, so it may not last as long. But if you want to make sure you're taking care of your products through the logistics process so that when it gets to the chef, it's fresh and then it lasts throughout the week. So how to access the chef market? So one, reach out to chefs during quiet times. If you get to a restaurant and like everyone is running around like crazy, like don't try to go sell your products then, wait until it's quiet. Wednesday afternoons tend to be a good time for this. Because they're not really dealing with lunch rush or the dinner rush yet, and they're getting their deliveries. Another thing is to actually bring product samples, and this is probably another thing that we maybe should highlight on the direct to customer thing too, especially when you're new. Like have product samples at the farmers market, like let people taste things. For chefs especially, like bring samples, like let them cook with it, see how they like it. Because again, if you're growing a quality product, that's going to shine in this product sample, and then they're going to be really excited to buy it. And we talked a little bit about, kind of herding the chef cats and, managing all of that, but do send out weekly fresh sheets, via email or text or however folks like to receive orders. And then be an excellent communicator. Make sure you follow up, be like, hey, I know you've been buying from me. I didn't get your order yesterday. Is there anything that, you'd like this week before I sell out? And just we'll use the term polite harassment a few times, but this is one point where we'll use that term. Be friendly about it, but be like, hey, chef, I think you want something from me. Like, better put your order in now, otherwise you're not going to get it this week.
One thing to add on here is this is where we're doing this 6-week or 7-week webinar series. There are pieces that intertwine. And as you are just starting out, if you're completely beginning on the farm, you don't necessarily know, looking at that row of turmeric, what your yield is going to be. And with a chef, if you say, I can deliver this much, they're going to make their meal plans and do their advertising of dishes based on what you've told them that you can provide. And so you need to have the ability to look at a field and say, okay, I have 4 rows of arugula. I think that's going to be 50 pounds. 4 25-foot rows. We'll go with 50 pounds. And then if you go sell that arugula, it better be 50 pounds. Because if you drop off 45 at your chef client on Wednesday, they now have to figure out where that extra 5 pounds is going to come from. And circling back to being an excellent communicator, if you're going to be short on something, tell them as soon as you know. And then circling back to some of the operational analysis that we're going to go into in a couple of weeks, how do you as a beginning farmer develop that sense to look out at your field and say, okay, I think I have 50 pounds of arugula, or I have 200 pounds of turmeric. How do you, it is a sense that you develop, but you develop that by tracking your harvests, by taking pictures, by going out and every week making guesses and saying, okay, before I start harvesting, I think I have 50 pounds of arugula. I'm going to go harvest, and you know what? Crap, that's like 25. Okay, next week you do that same process again, but you have to write it down, because if all you're depending on is your memory of how much you have harvested and what that row looked like that week that you were 25 pounds under what you thought you would have, you're not going to be very accurate. And I've learned this the hard way.
In Kirsten, it's not just, oh, I need to remember this so that next week I know. It's also next year, so that in January, when you go to your chef clients and be like, hey, this is what I'm gonna have this season, like you actually have a record, be like, oh crap, last year I had half the amount of arugula I thought I was going to. Like either I need to figure out a new fertilization plan or something else, or I just need to like double the amount of arugula I plant.
Yeah.
If
And
y'all's memory is anything like mine, like I don't even remember anything the next day, much less the next year, unless I write it down.
yeah. And right now at my farm, I am both doing those projections and grappling with those uncertainties on a UPIC level and on a wholesale level, because UPIC people come in and I've got a little bit more flexibility. I don't know exactly how much they're going to pick. I require people to book appointments. So, if something is really wrong, I can reschedule their appointment and push them back. I've got that flexibility. Wholesale, I sell wholesale on Wednesdays because most people don't come out in the middle of the week to pick strawberries. Everybody's coming over the weekend, and strawberries don't stop producing just because it's a weekday. So during the middle of that week, I'm selling wholesale. Now, I'm lucky in that I have a really good wholesaler that I'm working with, but I was completely honest with them of like, I'm not sure how long my season is going to last because I'm in a very unique little microclimate. I have the potential to run until July or August with strawberries. That means I don't know whether my strawberry yields are going to be a nice, long, smooth curve, or whether I'm going to have a super high peak at the beginning that then tails off, or whether I'm just going to have a short strawberry season with a high peak. I'm trying to make things with my hands and I don't know that it's actually working. So when my wholesaler's like, well, how much do you think you're going to have each week for me? And I'm like, it's going to be anywhere between 100 and 300 pounds. And the closer I get into that, I can start to estimate it more tightly. But they wanted to know in February roughly what the volume was going to be and how long it was going to last. And I just had to say, I don't know. And, fortunately, there are not many people who have a snowball's chance in hell of having strawberries in July. And so if I have any strawberries in July, they're going to be thrilled to take them. But that's not true for all crops. And it's, that estimation is my experience with this particular space, which is, I'm going into my third year here, so I don't have a huge track record in this space. It's my experience with growing strawberries over 7 years. Next year, I'm going to have a lot more data that I can then work with my suppliers midweek and say, okay, I think I'm likely to have 250 pounds this week and 400 pounds next week and maybe 500 the week after that. But I have to record that data this year. And if I don't record that data, good luck. I've got the memory of a goldfish.
Yeah, so I think that one's on March 20th, I think.
Yeah.
So we won't spend as much time on institutional customers because this is, not one you guys said you were as interested in, but kind of what they're looking for is they're also looking for reliability. Like they want what they ordered when they ordered it on spec. They may also be looking for slightly different things like food they can brand as healthy for the people they're serving or sustainable as part of their corporate sustainability goals. And again, shelf life because they're getting deliveries once a week. How to access this market. So have your certifications in hand before you start approaching them. And again, recognize they can be slow. The phrase, politely obnoxious, following up once a week, like, hey, said you would sign the contract, hey, you said you would introduce me to this person, in a nice way, but you're going to have to be persistent and then just network like crazy. So, AgLanta and East Point Grown, they can help with this. Other nonprofits in the area can probably help with this, and even just like other farmers, like ask them who they sell to and if they want to buy a complimentary product from another farmer. And then retail customers, so they are because it is still relying on the end customer to pick the product off the shelf and buy it. The end customer is still looking for some of the story and the localness and the sustainability, but you are not there to tell them about that. So make sure it's reflected on your packaging somewhere. If you're selling to a store in Atlanta, make sure you have like the Georgia Grown sticker. Maybe put like, hey, here is the QR code to our social media so you can see our story, something like that might work. And again, you're going to want produce that's pretty, produce that's consistent, that has a long shelf life. And again, you could make a sustainability argument because a lot of these retail stores also have corporate sustainability goals, and you can help make the argument that, hey, I'm helping you meet this corporate goal that you have. And again, how to access the retail store market is pretty similar to how you access institutions. And then, you know, Kroger and Whole Foods do have supplier programs. So you might be able to walk into the small local mom and pop and just ask to talk to the manager, and they might, you know, be able to be the ones who make that decision. You walk into a Kroger and do that, there's no way, you know, you're going to have to talk to the corporate distribution people, but they do have programs that can help with that. And, you know, one thing that Sean, I think it was Sean who made this point earlier of like, I heard a rumor that you have to have like pretty big volumes. That's definitely true. You know, the warning here is, if something is not selling at a good volume, these retail outlets will drop you pretty fast, without much warning. So you may want to make sure that, you know, you really are confident in your product's ability to sell. So, you know, maybe having a retail track record of like, hey, I've already sold through Common Market and Fresh Market or Fresh Harvest, and it's been successful. So I feel good about taking it to a retail store because the customers know who I am. And or just making sure you have a good backup plan of like, I know where this product's going to go if Kroger drops me. The other thing is, you know, the bigger food brands, so like, you know, the Kellogg's and the General Mills, like they're paying for shelf placement, and they're, you know, they might be distributing coupons. So just know that, especially if you have a value added product that's going on a shelf and not in the produce section necessarily, you know, if you're on the very bottom shelf, you're gonna have to be like particularly eye catching for the customer to like go down there when, you know, just like the big commercial brand is like staring them right in the eyeballs. And then wholesale, again, depending on the wholesaler, this can be a little bit different, but generally they are looking for you to be reliable. Again, they want to know how much you're going to grow when, so that they can plan and they can sell to their customers. So I think Kirsten highlighted, like, if you don't know, just be honest about that. Be like, hey, here's kind of the range I'm expecting. Like, I'll let you know, once we're a little bit further into the season, I can see how stuff is producing. But, here's my best guess right now. They're also looking for consistent produce. So it's a lot easier to put things in packages and on pallets if it's all the same size. Again, if you have the tomatoes that come in, like some of them are like this big and some of them are like the size of your head, that can be a little just bit of a challenge from a logistics perspective. And then also shelf life, because again, the product's got to get from you to the wholesaler and then from the wholesaler to the end customer. So if it goes bad in that process, they're not going to want to buy from you. And how to access the market. So this one's a little bit easier. You will, again, need the certifications, but there's a lot of wholesale businesses out there. So Common Market, Royal Foods, Fresh Harvest are all some in the Atlanta area. Ask farmers and, the folks on this call who they use. And then again, the flexibility on consistency and order size and all that will kind of depend on who it is, and what their policies are. And then we're not even going to bother talking about what the commodity markets want, because it's just cheap. Whatever is cheap is what they want. All right. So again, we were just talking a long time, so it's time for a poll. Justin, is any of mine bring that up? And this question is, in what form do you mostly sell your produce? So do you sell mostly unprocessed produce? So, like here's a tomato, or, here's a quarter cow. Do you sell somewhat processed? So you might, maybe you like cut up produce for someone, or you might sell cuts of meat instead of, like whole sides. Or do you do like full value added products? So your jams, soaps, pre-made foods, things like that. So it looks like everybody sells minimally processed, and then a couple of other folks are doing somewhat processed and then value added products. Let's wait another second or two in case any more answers come in. And again, if you haven't started selling yet, you can answer this as, what form are you planning to sell your produce in? So again, looks like everyone sells minimally processed. And then we've got a couple of others that add some value to the product. Cool. All right. So, value added products. So basically, value added means you took some extra steps to do something else to the product that makes it more valuable for the customer. So you either made it easier for the customer to consume, or you made its storage life longer, or you transformed it into another product. And so kind of the more effort you put into transforming the product, generally the higher price you get, the harder it is. So you may need like a commercial kitchen to make pre-made foods or jams in a way that you don't need to just sell tomatoes. And then also, the effort increases obviously because you're adding more value to it. So, selling apples isn't that hard. You pick the apple, you wash it, you sell it to the customer. If you're making jam, then, you have to turn that into jam, you have to cook it, and you got to put it into the jars, and you got to make sure like the food safety is okay. And if you're making like apple pies, then then you have to like make the whole pies and do all the packaging. And so it's, you can kind of see there's different levels for doing this. Even within value added products, there's different tiers of how hard stuff is to do. And one point here is all of the sales channels we talked about earlier apply for value added products. So you can sell value added products direct to customer, you can sell them wholesale, you can sell them in a retail store, and kind of the same considerations apply of, price versus effort. And there's, one way we kind of hinted at, we were talking about farmers cooperating with each other. So there's actually ways to do this with value added products too. So, the first way to do value added products is like you do all the work and you sell it yourself. And so one thing you want to think about is one, like, do I have the capabilities to actually make the product? So do I have the labor? Do I have the facilities? Do I have the certifications that I need? And then also, like these products I'm going to make, am I going to sell them through the same channels? Am I going to bring my jam to the farmer's market with my produce? Because that could work well. Or, if you're selling wholesale, but you're also making apple pies, like the apple pies probably won't sell wholesale as well as like just the apples would. So you might have to come up with a whole different sales strategy, which could be a challenge. The second, way to do this is someone else does the work and you sell the product. So if you've got like this amazing product, but you are not a good cook, or maybe you raise cattle and you want to do something with the leather, but like you're not good at leather working. You might sell the product to somebody else, and they do the work, and then you buy it back from them in the finished form, and you're the one who sells that. So, if you're like, I'm not a good baker, I'm actually also not a good farmer, so this is probably a bad example. But I might grow apples, give it to my friend who's a good baker, they make the pies, and then I buy the pies back and sell them at the farmer's market, because I'm going to be able to sell them well. So that can work. And then the last one is someone else does the work and then they also sell the product. So this could be, like it's kind of like a wholesale situation, just, a little bit more strategic. So, your baker friend might really, really, really want your apples because they know that your apples are much better than what they can get from Cisco. So they're going to buy the apples from you, and maybe they'll put your branding on it, like, hey, this apple pie was made with apples from Kirsten's farm. And so that can be a good way to do it. And we've got a hand raised. Chandra, you have a question?
No question, but I was just thinking about co-ops who kind of do these or a combination of these, and Ocean Spray is a really good example of a co-op that kind of does this or a combination of this.
Yeah, that's a great example. So I think a variant on the third one is, you have lots of farmers who agree, we're all going to work together, and then one person is going to do the work and sell the product on behalf of all of us. So, we're going to sell our cranberries to, this like one manufacturer that's going to turn it into cranberry juice. And then Tanisio gave some other examples too. Welch's, Land O'Lakes, Organic Valley. I think Iroquois Valley does this as well with their dairy products.
Mm-hmm. Though, especially with dairy, one of the interesting wrinkles is that you're signing a contract with the co-op for all of your production. So we talked with a potential customer, and they're interested in diverting some of their dairy production to do an on-farm creamery, but they're not certain whether their contract with the co-op that they're working with actually allows that. Not that that's good or bad, it's just something else to keep in mind.
And then, the big green box on the bottom, does the product have a strong business case? Like that should always be a consideration. You don't want to sell a value-added product that's going to be more work for you than it is worth selling. So we're going to talk about business cases specifically in our March 27th webinar. So stay tuned for that one if you've got more questions about like, okay, well, how the heck do I evaluate if this product is going to make sense for me to invest in? All right, and our last poll for the day. So do you want to sell value-added products? So Eva, I don't know what it is with you in polls, but feel free to put your answer in the chat. So the answers are, yes, I already sell value-added products. Yes, I have a prototype, but I don't have the capabilities to scale it yet. Yes, but I don't have an idea or the time to develop one. And then no, I do not want to sell value-added products. So looks like so far we have 1 farmer who already sells them, 2 who have a prototype but not the capabilities to scale, 2 who want to sell value-added products but don't have an idea for what they would do or the time to develop an idea, and then 1 farmer who said no. And then Eva says, yes, she does sell value-added products. So we've got 2 votes for yes. And then Tunisia, do you want to share the comment you put in the chat with the group and with the recording?
Sure. So ultimately, why I brought up my question earlier was actually tied directly to the point that we're unpacking now regarding cooperatives and value-added products, because much of what we have been discussing, if you all have noticed, is really about raw goods, right? But once you take that raw good and you turn it into a value-added product, a lot of the negative variables can actually go away. So for example, if you team up with farmers and one farmer's products don't necessarily look as good as another, well, that's only because you're looking at it as a raw good. But once you turn tomatoes down into paste, no one knows what that tomato used to look like before it became a paste. And now you've increased its market value and you've been able to create a consistency amongst a group that everyone can meet. And then next, once you add that into which market channels you're choosing to sell to, you can reduce a lot of your costs because as Alex was showing you, you have labor costs, you have delivery costs, you have packaging costs, and now you're sharing those amongst the group versus you taking them on as your own individual business. And you may find that some of those other market outlets that don't look as desirable as an individual farm are actually great as a cooperative.
Yeah, great point. All right, so our last topic we're going to cover is, okay, you got this great market strategy, you know what sales channel you want to go after, but how do you know that it's working? So can you ask yourself the question, how much does it cost me to get a customer, and then how much is that customer worth to me? And then when I kind of do all the numbers, like, is that customer actually profitable enough to support my business? So there's a couple of terms you may see in the marketing space about how to answer these questions. And so the first one is what's called a customer acquisition cost. And so this is just how much do you spend on marketing divided by how many new customers does that get you? So if you spent $1,000 on ads, you got 10 new customers, then your customer acquisition cost is $100. And then the second point of how much is that customer worth to me? So this is called customer lifetime value. And it's basically like, how much is this customer going to buy from you over the course of, their relationship with you? So if it's a chef and that, the chef moves around a lot, every time they move to a new restaurant, you got to like restart the relationship. And so, that customer lifetime value might be a few $1,000s versus an institution, they're hard to sell to, but like once you're in, generally that can last a long time. So maybe that customer is worth $100,000. And so that's worth a lot more, upfront investment. And then the last thing, operating profits. So we again talked about this one a little bit on the financial management workshop, but that's basically, what are the costs to run my farm day to day? Like what were the costs to make this tomato and run the tractor and pay my farm mortgage and all this stuff? How much money is the farm making? And like, is the product I'm selling, helping me cover all those costs? And so, oh, Kirsten, do you want to add something?
I was just going to say, like, looking at these definitions, probably most of you guys do not know what these numbers are. And that is totally normal. Like, I do not know what my current customer acquisition cost or customer lifetime value is. I know my general profit, but because of the model that I'm running, it is really difficult to go through and separate out the individual customers, where they came from and how long I've had them. And then there's also just the element of, I run the sort of business where people come back year after year after year. So I know that my, current customer lifetime value is probably the length of time that I've been at this location. But I don't know how long that's going to go into the future. So we are going to be going over how to start to calculate these numbers, but they are not set in stone in any way, shape, or form. They're going to vary from year to year, from month to month, as you update your numbers, and you get to a point where you have a best guess that you refine over time.
Yeah, and a couple of examples we're about to show, like, frankly, for a lot of farms, this is going to be overkill. Like, you may not actually need to do this. But if your farm is new and you're kind of trying to figure out the sales side, or you're unprofitable and you're really experimenting with some things to try to improve your farm's finances, these things can be really helpful to track, to like let you know, okay, well, I tried running this promotion, or I tried this partnership with another farmer, or I tried running Facebook ads for the first time, and like it can help you understand, like, did that work or not? Was that worth the investment? But again, if you look at this, you're like, holy crap, that's a lot of work. Just know that, once your business is kind of in a steady state and you feel good about your profitability, like, you probably don't need to be doing this consistently. This is kind of a learning and growing tool. So the first example is, how might you track for, like, I sell mostly to a farmer's market. I've just got people showing up every week. I don't really have a good way of tracking this. Like, what are some ways that I can get creative around just knowing if this works? So, first off, like, track your revenue every week. This is like ultimately the metric that matters the most. Like, how much money are you bringing in? And that one should be an easier one to track. And then, total customers and new customers, like, total customers can be kind of hard, especially if you've got a lot of them and, you're not, especially if they're like paying cash, so you don't have like a square record, or, you're not doing a CSA, so you don't know, like, okay, well, I filled 100 boxes, so that's 100 customers, but it's just like, hey, a bunch of people showed up and bought a bunch of tomatoes, and I don't really know how many of them there were. But again, if you like really need to invest in this, it might be worth just like having a little tracker next to your, square register or your cash box, and just, like making a tick every time someone pays for something. And then, to track new customers, it might just be as simple as like, you indicate every time, like, you see someone who you don't recognize from a previous week, or you even just ask them, like, hey, is this your first time, shopping here? Or, did you buy something last week, and like, how was it? Can just be a good way to, one, engage your customers, and two, kind of collect a little bit of this data on the sly. Marketing spend, that should also be an easier one to track, of just like, how much did I spend on ads and flyers, or, how much time did I spend going door to door talking to chefs? And that can give you like a rough estimate of what your customer acquisition cost is. Basically, is you just take your marketing spend divided by the number of new customers. And again, even if this is just a guess, it can give you a ballpark of, my customer acquisition cost is pretty low, so it's the marketing I'm doing seems to be working. I should probably do some more of it if I still got more stuff to sell, versus like, hey, I invested all this time and money in marketing and like I didn't see anyone new this week. That might be a problem. And again, it might be helpful to track your time spent on marketing and sales, because if you're like bringing in tons of revenue and lots of new customers, but you're spending like 40 hours a week on marketing, like that can be an indication of either you need to hire somebody, or it's really just not worth your time anymore to keep investing in this. And then if you're selling anything online, so CSAs, or you have a little Shopify store to sell value added products, you've got like some more cool things you can track. So again, this is us just being a little bit of marketing nerds and just sharing like what the potentials are. Again, you don't need to track all these things if your farm is generally performing well, but like if you're really working on those sales and really trying to get more profitable, these can be helpful things to track. So, one is this thing called a conversion rate. So that's basically for every person who sees your email or your ad or your social media post, like how many of them actually like click on the link and go to your store and buy something. And generally a good metric that's kind of like throughout the industry is 2%. So a 2% conversion rate is pretty reasonable. So if you're way less than 2%, like, maybe your ad's just not very good, or it's not clear what you're selling, or like you took a bad picture and like the customer's like, I don't want to buy that. Whereas if you got, higher than a 2% conversion rate, then that may be a sign of like, man, like whatever ad you ran like really worked, or they really liked the social media post of like, the cute baby goats or like whatever it was. So try to do more of that. And again, we talked about customer acquisition costs, and then customer churn. So this is, how many people that you sold to last week like did not show up this week. So there's not really great benchmarks around what's good churn, but if if your churn is normally like, you lose like one customer a week and you've got 50 customers, so you're not really too worried about that. But then 1 week, like half your customers don't show up, you might be like, oh my God, like what happened? Did all of them get food poisoning? Did I accidentally like, insult their mothers to them at the market last week? Like what happened? So that can just be an indication of, again, something is going well or not. Or if you see like your churn slowly go down over time, you're building good customer loyalty, good relationships, etc. And then customer lifetime value, one way to calculate this is basically to take how much money you get from your customers in a given period of time and divide it by the churn. So if you've got so let's say this is weekly data. So if you've got a 5% customer churn, then on average, your customers are going to stick around for 20 weeks. And so if you're selling them a $50 CSA box and they stick around on average for 20 weeks, then that's $1,000 for your customer lifetime value. And so that could be helpful to know. So like if you're spending $1,000 on marketing to acquire a customer that then is only worth $500 to you, that's not good. So again, this is like quite in-depth numbers, but again, they can be helpful for specific cases. All right, and then some tips and tricks, especially like if you're selling direct to customer at the farmer's market, you're like, how the heck am I going to track this? Because again, people just show up. So we talked already about having digital ads or email newsletters that click into your CSA, so you can kind of track things that way. Another thing you can do is like put discount codes in your ads of say like, come see me at the farmer's market and get, a free pound of tomatoes. And then whenever the customer comes to you and say like, hey, I saw your ad, here it is, can I get my free pound of tomatoes? You're like, ah, yes, you saw that and I don't recognize you, so I got a new customer doing this. So that worked well. And then if, you run these ads and no one brings you the discount code, you're like, well, maybe I'm targeting the wrong audience, or again, they didn't like the ad, or, something else happened. You can also offer rewards for referring a friend. So, hey, share this referral code, and if your friend signs up for a CSA, you both get $20 off. And then every time, someone uses that referral code, then like, okay, that marketing campaign worked. It can also be a good indication of, hey, I'm building really good customer loyalty because like people like to refer their friends. Because, I'm sure you guys have had this experience of like, you're not going to refer something to somebody unless you really like it. Because if you refer something to them and they don't like it, then why did you waste your social capital on that? And then We got another good comment in the chat there. Tunisia, you want to come off mute and add some color to that one?
Sure. It's just really a mathematical occurrence of, all of these points that Alex is bringing up about, assessing what are the best, advertisement outlets and techniques. Once you find the ones that work and you break that 2% mark, there begins to become a snowball effect, if you will, in which the ability to market to your audience takes on a life of its own. It doesn't necessarily mean that your costs are going to need to go away with regards to marketing, but you'll find that now people are starting to get more into an automated mode of knowing about you, and they become more familiar. As we were all joking earlier, right? Even though it surprised me as well too that You Quiero Taco Bell marketing ad purportedly didn't work well, we're still talking about it right now, and they haven't paid a dime to market that. So that's what critical mass is once things become very familiar and people begin to do the word of mouth, right? And they begin to market for you, then you know that if you haven't tracked it technically, theoretically, you'll know you broke that 2% mark. But if you can definitely look at the analytics, that'll help as well too, and help you know how close am I to reaching that point.
Well, that was the end of all of our content. I know that was a lot. So, before we jump into tools and resources, do y'all have any questions or comments or anything? And feel free to either come off mute or drop them in the chat.
To nudge them, I'd love to hear if anybody has some ad campaigns or marketing strategies, that they've used that they feel pretty comfortable sharing with people, and what has worked for them or something that didn't work and a lesson learned.
Yeah, doesn't have to be from a farm business either, because I know we have some newer farmers, but like something that's worked for you in another line of business.
I can go. During COVID, I actually put something on Nextdoor and on Facebook Marketplace, and then I ended up meeting a bunch of new neighbors and also selling more from my house. So it was actually nice. And I didn't think about that before. And then I forgot about that, and I was talking about it with someone else, and I reactivated the advert, and I had like 5 people inquiring, within 2 days.
That's awesome.
I'm curious if we have any egg producers on the call and how these recent months affected your business with regards to marketing. I don't know if we have anybody on here who markets eggs. But I'm sure for those who have at least, of course, shopped right in the retail setting, you could pretty much guess that anybody that has been producing eggs, they could do a little bit of marketing that could go a long way, right? And be able to get some market share.
And I'll say, I'm not producing eggs, but one of the farmers at the Dunwoody Farmers Market is, and he's not marketing at all. Those things are just disappearing off the table before the end of the 2-hour market.
Mm-hmm. So one thing I'll encourage you all to do is to also take advantage of some of these moments. I can say as my own farm business, when COVID occurred, and many farmers that I've talked to, in fact, all of them, they were able to benefit from COVID. And that's not to be insensitive to other businesses or professions where people, lost income. But for farmers, that was a plus for us. And so finding those opportunities to also catapult your business, at the right moment, striking while the iron is hot, is important as well too, because you'll find that those may just come at a spontaneous moment, and you got to be ready to jump on them when they occur. But from both selling food to even consulting people on gardening, things of that nature, farms and agricultural businesses were definitely able to reap some benefits from when the pandemic was in its height.
And just to put some numbers on that, my farm went from roughly 42,000 in revenue in 2019 to 87,000 in 2020.
Yep, mine doubled as well. So I was going to say that's a great percentage you just highlighted, Kirsten, is that about 50% of what I gained all came from just the pandemic being around. So,
For the two of you, I'm interested. by chance, did you all have to pivot your platform or, the way you were reaching your audiences? The reason I ask is because I've actually heard some farmers mention that they transitioned from, a more in-person direct to consumer model to online sales or, pickups marketed through an email list or something like that.
I'll say this. I guess I can pat myself on the back a little bit. I've always sold through the internet. And yes, my internet business picked up even more. But I felt like, using the internet was going to be the wave of the future, if you will. And so I've been selling that way since 2011. But yes, it picked up tremendously once COVID took place.
And I can say I didn't really have to pivot. I had some online presence already in terms of the CSA. But what happened more so was that as soon as people realized that being outdoors was safer than indoors, and especially once stuff started shutting down, I had a 1/4 acre strawberry field inside Atlanta, and I had appointments, and I could say, okay, you're going to be one of 2 groups that are in this 1/4 acre during this time period, and I'll take your temperature at the farm gate, and here's your hand sanitizer, and kids were bouncing off the walls. Parents were more than ready to get them out into the field. I probably could have tripled my prices and still had no complaints.
Yeah, and obviously we hope that COVID doesn't happen again, but stuff's going to happen in the world, and as small businesses, we have a lot more flexibility to pivot and do creative marketing on the fly, and that's really an advantage that we have. So I mean, like you've seen the thing with bird flu, and folks don't trust poultry as much, but if they know it's coming from their local farmer where the chickens live outside in a healthier environment, and they've got eggs that are actually the same price as the grocery store eggs right now, but they're twice as good. Those are opportunities to kind of lean into those things, and really take advantage in ways that the big egg companies aren't going to be able to do. So we've listed some tools and resources here. So there's a lot of great marketing stuff out there. So there's lots of easy website makers. Google Analytics works well to kind of track how many hits your website's getting. There's like pre-made online stores. Shopify is kind of the king here, but Square does a good job as well. If you need to set up just like an online platform for a value-added product. And then if you have a CSA, there's other like Local Line works pretty well, and then there's others like Barn to Door that farmers use. So you could just kind of figure out which one works for you. You can run digital ads, and of course you can run them in physical places as well, your local stores and whatnot. Lots of email newsletter providers, lots of marketing platform and analytics providers that help you kind of get some of these numbers we were talking about. To create ads, again, if you're not artistic, never fear. There's Canva and Vista Create are both pretty good platforms for making something that looks good, that uses your branding without too much effort on your part. And then of course, if any of this is overwhelming, we can help. And then there's lots of nonprofit resources out there as well that are, all about promoting local food. And of course, we've got more webinars, so please, sign up for the last 4 of these. There's going to be some really good content. So I know everyone's eager to learn how to get more money for their farming, or for their farm. So that'll be the topic next week. And then we'll cover operational analysis and data collection on the farm, and how do you make your farm operations better, which is critical for everybody. And we'll talk about business cases, and then QCS will come in on April 3rd to cover organic certification. And then anyone in the metro Atlanta area, we will have a follow-on workshop to go into more detail on some of this stuff. And then there'll be one-on-one coaching available on, whatever marketing and sales you want to talk about. So what should my strategy be? How should I tell my story? How do I set up all these like digital tools? how do I, like sell to a chef? Like, what does that role play look like? And, whatever else you want help with. So again, if you are in the Metro Atlanta area, the AgLanta and East Point Grown programs will help cover that. If you're outside Metro Atlanta, just reach out to me, and we do offer farmer-friendly prices. The other thing is, so if you want to join this workshop, please take the survey that Justin's going to send out after this. Also, we have scheduled the workshop for Sunday, but if Sunday's not a good day for you, please just let us know. If it's like, hey, this is family day, or this is my day off, or whatever it is, we do have some flexibility on the date. So just let us know what works well for you.
Yeah, and as Alex mentioned, that survey will be automatically distributed by Zoom after exiting this webinar. So once you see that survey pop up on your screen, if you could please fill out those responses. And for those who are looking to access that one-on-one assistance or in a workshop format, please indicate in that survey question that you're looking for that resource, and we can partner you with the Good Agriculture crew and get you some more attention for your businesses. So thank you so much, Alex and Kirsten, and everyone for your contributions and input. This has been another robust session. We will have the recording available to distribute. You all please look out for the follow-up email, which will have all of the links in there. And we hope to see you all next Monday. Thank you all so much for joining.
Take care, everyone. Have a good evening.
Yeah.